Welcome back to IGN Live from Gamescom in Germany. I'm your host, Damon Hatfield. I'm joined now by my good friend, Nathan Vela.
We're doing that.
Man,
yep.
We're going to throw down.
Daps, there we go.
Infinite daps. It's time to check in on Below.
Yeah, let's check it out.
The very, very cool, very, very awesome Below. One of my most anticipated games.
It's also my most anticipated game.
That's why we get along so well.
Yeah, it's very strange that I actually like our game a lot. Yeah. Below is Cappy's take on mixing adventure and roguelike into a kind of beautiful, strangely crafted, zoomed out scale, unique little thing. It's a game really about exploration. It's a game where you play this tiny character, doesn't have a name because there's no text in the game and there's no tutorials in the game and there's no explanations and hints and direction. Yeah. It's you as this small, weak little character exploring the world. But you're also kind of exploring the systems in the game, the controls, the combat. You're not just really like, you're given this space, but you're not just told what to do in it. So you actually have to figure it all out for yourself.
We're starting here at the beginning, right? This is where it starts.
Yeah, the game basically starts with the character, the Wanderer. We just call them the Wanderer.
Sure.
It's not really defined whether it's a guy or a girl or what. It's just, that is the character. And you sail up to this island in the middle of an ocean of nothingness. And you are basically on the island. You can explore the island itself. It's not huge, but it's quite large. And it's kind of the prologue, the calm before the storm. And on the island, there is a doorway, and that doorway leads you into the kind of game proper. And that's kind of where the game itself really starts. But there are pieces on the island that you can come back to and maybe do stuff with, maybe not. But the way the game really works is you're really just this lone character in this massive world. The camera's really far back.
Sure.
And part of the reason why we did that is because we really wanted you to feel tangibly the sense of scale and the fact that you are a weak, meager, one mistake from death character. Basically, you will die a lot in this game. It is very much inspired by roguelikes. Death is permanent, and there is a lot of procedural generation going on as well, which we'll show you in a bit. But really, you're so small because you're so weak. But you're not weak in the sense that you don't have any kind of tools.
Sure.
You're weak in the sense that you're kind of a real person. And the way that works in the game is that every time you take damage, from the smallest little enemy all the way up to the hugest enemy, you're going to start bleeding. A little enemy will just you'll bleed a little bit slow. You're not going to be gushing blood.
Sure.
Larger enemies you will for sure. But you actually have to deal with that bleeding, and we'll come back to that later. Light is also really important in the game because it's a really dark game. You're in the depths of this kind of unending dungeon going downwards or below.
Sure.
Nudge,
If
nudge.
you will.
Yes, wink, wink. And you have access to torches, and you also have a little lantern on your side. But like almost everything in the game, there is a thoughtfulness behind using it and limitations on using it. Your torches run out over time, and your lantern also runs out over time. So you either need to find more lantern fuel or relight your torches. There's everything in the game you have to kind of deal with in that way.
So we're descending the stairs here. Isn't there a point where you sort of set up a camp, and then that's where if you die, you'll come back to there?
Well, the way that death works in the game is actually you're not playing the same character over and over again. You're actually playing a chronology of characters. So when you die, the next character arrives at the island after the last version. And that plays up the kind of persistent element of the game where goals achieved by every life stay. So let's say that you manage to find an important item, maybe a key that unlocks a door, and then you die. You don't have to go back, find that key, re-unlock the door. That's already done because the work that you've done with that character has persisted through. And in a way, Below is about building on the kind of achievements and the things that you've done with your past lives to make the future lives be able to be more successful.
So there are those persistent elements, but then the dungeon is also procedurally generated, right?
So every time you arrive, you're going to find maybe a trap that's going to kill you. And there are traps littered, and So Chris is kind of playing like he's new to the game. Now he knows what a trap is. Now maybe he's noticed like, oh, these things on the floor, not too safe. He's not going to make the same mistake twice. And maybe that also provides him hints to what other traps might look like. So now he can start figuring out what the kind of like motifs of danger are for that type of game. He's also going to learn a lot about combat. And combat is I mean, it's a sword and shield game. Okay. You always have a sword, you always have a shield, and you're very kind of like able to deal with things that way. You're able to hold up your shield, you're able to swing your sword around, and if you do die, you can do what Chris did and loot your last corpse, because all of those things are going to be there. So Chris picked up the torch fluid from his last life and is able to now use that to his advantage. He also got smoked by a dart trap, and now he knows what dart traps actually look like and can avoid those as well. But yeah, coming back to the combat in the game, as we get deeper in the dungeon, right now it's very kind of sparse on the enemies, but as you get deeper, there are more enemies, there are more dangerous enemies, there are larger enemies, there are more complex enemies, and so survival starts playing into it in a massive way. You have to think about exploration, finding those breadcrumbs that are going to lead you to those important parts, but you also have to think a lot about survival. You have to know that like there are certain things in the dungeon that are going to kill you, that are going to damage you, and you have to think about how you're going to heal, how you're going to persist when the deeper you go, maybe the less likely it is to find those items that are going to keep you alive.
Real quick, as you're playing, is there any sort of like hints that you're given towards a goal other than just to see how far down it goes? Is there any, does the narrative start to develop?
Absolutely. There is a massive, really deep lore and narrative and backstory to the game. There's a purpose behind kind of everything that's there. And the way that you find that is through, as I like to say, purposeful exploration, with air quotes. And basically what that means is you have to just be thinking about and looking at your environment. You have to try to find those breadcrumbs that'll lead you through the depths, because you can get lost. You can just it'll randomly generate itself until you're kind of, really deep, but you might not know where you're going. But if you manage to find, I'll notice things like, oh, if I go near this door, it makes a certain sound. Or if I notice that there's a flag by this door, and you start following those breadcrumbs, that's what's going to bring you to the story. That's what's going to bring you to a point where it might actually ask you questions like, were there people here before me? Why is there an encampment that's totally devoid of life now? How long ago were they there? And what that's also going to do is start giving you purpose towards, like, why am I actually here? And we're not telling you the story at all. We are totally going to let you figure it out. And we really hope that, and we really believe that players are bloody smart and super, super good at finding out the little things that we're going to pace through it. And I really hope that the community that we're trying to build around the game, they'll be the ones that will be telling the story rather than us shoving the story down their throat.
Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you guys at Cappy make some pretty good games. You're pretty good at it.
Let's keep talking about that. Let's keep that. Let's have an entire 20-minute talk about how we make good games.
You take some time. It takes some time.
We do. We take our time, and we really do believe that players can tell when you put that time into a game. I believe that video game fans are some of the most they focus and notice things that developers put in the game. Whether it's a game made by 250 people or a game made by 22 people, they're going to tell when the developers are really putting themselves into it. And that's the only way we know how to work.
So how much more time do you have to put into this one?
It's definitely a 2015 game. We're not exactly sure when in 2015. I mean, obviously we would love to get it out as soon as we can. But I don't know if that means like really soon 2015 or really late in 2015. One of the things that I think we do is I like to use the kind of like analogy of like baking.
Baking?
Yeah. Like the way that we make our games is like we really try to find the best ingredients, and we really try to give it time to cook, right? We don't want to pull it out partway through, because raw parts of video games, people notice them very quickly, and those are the things for me as a player that ruin games for me. Is when you can tell there's great ideas that are half-baked. And as a result, I mean, that's why Time Force took us a while.
Sure.
That's why Sorcery took us a while. And hopefully the people that are fans of our games or that are interested in it will, in the end, appreciate that.
Is the ending of the game in here now? Like, can you beat the game at this stage?
No, you can't. We have like the ending crafted, but it's not fully. But the thing is the ending is a very strange thing because there is an ending.
Yeah.
But the way that you get from A to Z is very different every time you play.
Sure.
And the chances of you taking the same path through the depths to get to an ending twice is very rare.
Yeah.
It's going to be I mean, it's the biggest game we've ever made by far.
Wow.
In terms of scope, but also in terms of like depth and the concepts and the ideas that we're trying to achieve. Like one of the things is we've built and are building a flora and a fauna to the world. So Chris is out on a beach.
Yeah,
he's kind of exited.
It's quite a change of scenery here.
Yeah, so he's figured out how to get outside of the dungeon again, outside of the depths again. And you saw those dogs. A lot of people just go in there and murder the hell out of dogs.
That's terrible.
And it's terrible because they're not really interested in you. They're kind of like, you know, you smell weird, so they're going to come check you out. But they are part of this just kind of ecosystem of the depths. They're like, you get accosted by bats, but all they're doing is just kind of flying around you and checking you out. Do you like my bat mimicking right there? That was really good. I made it much clearer.
I believed it.
That's actually the only thing that you can hear right now. The only thing anyways, there's a big system around like what plants you can pick up, how the plants grow, the animals in the dungeon. You might actually find like little owls that are going to check you out. But you don't really have to kill them necessarily. You totally can. And another part of the game is that weapons are a lot more scarce. It's not a loot grab, it's not a Diablo style game or a Torchlight style game, although we love those to death. You can pick up a bow and arrow, you can decide to murder some dogs, and now that Chris has murdered those dogs, things change a little bit. They're not super happy with you. They're going to come try to maw at your ankles, and Chris has got to watch out. But there is an advantage, in a way, to killing some of these things, because now they provide you with meat.
Sure.
And that's part of the survival as well. You need to actually think about sustaining yourself. You need to think about your health. And you can't just survive on eating plants. You don't make friends with salad.
Sure.
And that actually persists through below as well. You need a way to sustain yourself. And that flora and fauna is something that, like, as you go deeper into the depths, will change and will morph into something a little bit different, because you're only 1 or 2 layers down. There's still sunlight, there's still water, there's still all of those things needed to sustain it in a natural way. As you get lower, things might get a little unnatural. You might find areas that are not necessarily just caves, that might look like they've been created by something. And that, as you go deeper, as you explore further, as you survive longer, that's when the big discovery elements come into the game. That's when you're really finding out the bigger questions that the game is going to ask you.
It sounds like what's going to push me forward is, God, I just want to know. I want to see what's down there.
Well,
what's next?
We also believe that there's like exploration, I think, is intrinsically tied to challenge, right? Like when the game holds your hand, the sense of exploration kind of dissipates a little bit. It kind of you feel less in control of where and what you're learning. And this game is almost entirely about shoving the concept of learning and exploration into the hands of the player and letting them figure it out for themselves.
Tell me about the visual cues the enemies give you with their different colors.
For sure. I mean, because the scale of the game is so different and so unique, but also so pulled out, we have to really find ways to focus your attention on key things. One of the things we do is we put tilt shift into the game. Tilt shift is a style of photography that basically deals with blurring outside of a focal plane, and that kind of helps you focus on the character. Enemies and their silhouettes and their colors are also hints. Every enemy is going to have very clear tells on, like, you know, they're going to pull back, turn white right before they attack, so you know, okay, I put up my shield or I dodge backwards. Yeah. Because your character's nimble and has a lot of ways of dealing with these things, we just need to make sure that you can, you know, that you always are clear what's going on around you. And that's a big challenge for us. It's definitely, we really wanted to make a game that has a unique viewpoint, that wasn't just relying on, you know, cameras and perspective that has been dealt with before. So right from the very beginning, when Chris pitched the game, he was like, let's take the camera, let's pull it way back, and let's use that to create single screen procedurally generated dungeons. So all of what you're seeing right now is procedurally generated, and as you kind of get familiar with the game, you'll start realizing, crap, all of the main dungeons are just one screen, so I know the space that I have to explore. I know that if I leave everything on the right-hand side of the screen in Fog of War, that's actually the space that I could be exploring.
Sure. So if I'm playing below and I need to take a break and do my homework, can I save my game like where I am on this screen, or?
You can press pause.
Well,
yeah, I mean, there is going to be both kind of light save system of some sort that we're still really working on because it's super challenging to figure that design out. But there's also going to be a quick travel concept in it as well. One of the most important things that I was talking about when it comes to the weapons and how it's not a loot grab is that you have your sword and shield, but you also only have one slot on your back. So early on, Chris found a bow and arrow, and then now he just found a spear, and he actually had to make the choice, like, do I want to keep my bow and arrow and use ranged weapons, or do I want to use my spear, which is stronger, has a longer range. But every weapon has a risk reward. The bow and arrow lets you deal with long distance, but it also is terrible up close. The spear, Chris just lost his head at a guillotine trap. Yeah, every weapon really has those. If you find a hammer, it's super powerful, but super slow. You find a spear, it's really long range, but when you do your attacks, it really puts you at risk to damage.
Sure.
So you have to make, like everything in the game, you can just grab a weapon and not really care, or you can think about it and deal with it with purpose. And again, that's all part of the exploration, and it's also all part of survival in the game, because really, the weapons are a big part of how you survive.
So we're a new wanderer coming into the dungeons now. Since everything's procedurally generated, how do you find your previous wanderer's corpse to get his loot?
So the way that we're dealing with it is depth is very important.
Okay.
So like you can move laterally throughout the dungeon, you can move up the way you came, and you can also move downwards. And as you move downwards, that's kind of how the game is keeping track of where you've died.
Okay.
So if you end up going down, say 10 levels, and you die, your body might not be in the exact same spot because the world is remixed and shifted and regenerated, but your corpse will be that far down.
Gotcha.
So you can always find it. And there are key things that, even main items that are going to stay with your body, but over time they might, through a mysterious way, replace themselves.
Sure.
Which is again something that you're going to have to learn how to deal with as well. That there are certain things that work in the game that will do stuff like grab items that you need and move them to a certain place.
Yeah. What do you think it is about roguelikes? I like roguelike games too. Well, they're notoriously difficult and challenging.
Well, I think in a weird way it's a backlash against games that are very simple and hand-holdy, and at the same time it's also about people really wanting to feel that sense of challenge and that sense of risk and that sense of living and dying by your understanding and talent of the game, right? Like one of the things that we've always loved about video games is being good at video games.
Sure.
I'm a huge fighting game fan. I spend a lot of time in training mode because I just want to be good at that game. And I think roguelikes provide people with an opportunity to really challenge themselves in a way that like other games that are more quick time eventy and again, I'm not disparaging these games, it's just a different take on what video games can be. I think it's just providing people who love that type of thing a very specific thing.
Do you think games in general have gotten easier over the years?
I think some games have gotten easier. I mean, I think it's proof that there is so much that can be done with this medium, and it's also proof that the people who love the culture around games are going to pick different things. They're going to pick what they like.
Yeah. And
whether it's independent games kind of opening up the different opportunities for different games, or whether it's big games providing deeper experiences in a certain genre. That's what we're trying to do with this game, is provide something specific. We're not trying to go out there and make a game for everybody on the planet. Below is for people who love this type of game, and we're included in that group.
You make independent games, but what's the best AAA game you played recently?
Evolve.
Well, yeah.
Evolve is, to me, I love multiplayer FPS, and Evolve is goddamn exciting.
Cool, Nathan, so much for giving us an update on Below.
Thanks for
awesome.
listening.
It continues to look awesome.
Hopefully it will continue to look awesome until it comes out. Thanks a lot for having us. And anybody who wants to check out the game, it's www.whatliesbelow.com. You can check out the Gamescom trailer on IGN or on our site, or there's a lot of stuff out there for you to find.
Look for it in 2015.
2015.
Real quick before we go, would you like to take this opportunity to announce Critter Crunch 2?
I will take this opportunity to not announce Critter Crunch 2.
You missed it.
I'm glad you liked it. I love that game.
I love that game too. I want to play that game. Nathan, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, dude.
Stay tuned. Lots more to come from IGN Live at Gamescom, brought to you by Dead Island 2, right after these messages.